A good life is a life built around fulfilling work, play, relationships, and lifelong learning. Welcome to Good Life Conversations, where we explore the stories and strategies of inspiring everyday people who are striving to create a life of purpose, meaning, and connection. Hi there, welcome to this Good Life Conversation. My name is Jay. I'm your host and the founder of Discovery Year, and today's guest is Ryan van Asten. Welcome, Ryan.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for being here. And as you might suspect, you can see perhaps in Ryan's background a lot of great photos. You may or may not be able to tell those are hockey teams. But Ryan is currently the director of performance at a company called Village Sports in Calgary. And Ryan has a long history of athletic performance, training, coaching for high-performing athletes, which includes a couple of teams in the NHL, the Calgary Flames and the Los Angeles Kings. And he was also a trainer for some Olympians at the 2010 Olympics in Vancouver. So we'll talk a little bit more about Ryan's education and his career and how he's landed where he is now. But like everyone, Ryan, we'd love to start with the question, which is tell us about a typical day. So what time do you tend to get up in the morning? Do you have morning routine? How many hours do you typically work? What happens after work? What time do you wind down, go to bed? Any rituals? Tell us about it.
Okay. Yeah. I have two little kids, 6 and 3 years old. I'm usually up pretty early. I usually wake up around, well, in the winter, usually around 6. In the summer, when I have athletes going through the gym, it's a little bit earlier, probably around 4:50, because I have to be training athletes by 6 in the morning. My morning routine is pretty standard. I usually wake up. First thing I do, and honestly, I tell all my athletes to do this, and I recommend this to everyone, including yourself, is I drink about 500 mils of water with electrolytes in it first thing before I drink any coffee or anything.
Hmm.
You've just slept for hopefully 8 hours or more. You're probably a little bit dehydrated, so the best thing you could do is get some water in you with electrolytes. Usually have a coffee. And then head to work. Not a big breakfast guy anymore. On weekends, I eat breakfast with my kids. Um, Come to work. Usually, I'll have a group of athletes first thing in the morning, train for about an hour to 2 hours if it's in the off season, and then have a bit of a break where I always work out myself. Try to do at least 30 to 45 minutes of exercise for myself to stay healthy, for my family. Um, and then I work like programming, planning, all those kinds of things, training in the off season. I'm on the floor with athletes for 8 hours a day, usually about 4 groups in the off season. And then I'm here all day, usually go home around 4 o'clock in the winter, well, even in the summer too, take my kids to sports activities, all that kind of stuff. And then in the evening, to be honest, I'm usually working a little bit more. So I'm trying to do more social media in the last year. That's kind of the time where I make sure all that's in order because I'm trying to be really consistent with that to, you know, provide good information for people and also, create awareness around my brand and our company's brand.
Hmm.
And that's like pretty standard. Nothing crazy, nothing out of the ordinary, just plug away.
And so, you have family time, and then the kids go down, and then you have a little bit of work. And what time will you typically, in order to get up at 4:50 and feel good about yourself, what time do you go to bed?
Yeah, so if I have to get up at 4:50, I'm usually trying to be asleep by 9:30,
Hmm.
which isn't usually a problem. In the fall and winter when I don't have to get up that early, I'm even on weekends, I usually go to bed around 10.
Hmm. Hmm.
So I try to get at least 7 hours of sleep a night, preferably 8, but yeah.
No,
Yeah, go to bed early, go to bed early, wake up early.
go to bed. As you can imagine, our students 18, 20 to 20 years old, they go to bed super early and they get up at the crack of dawn. I'm sure you're
Yeah,
not
yeah,
surprised
well,
to
I know. Yeah.
hear that. So we have a lot of people who talk. A lot of our mentors do get up pretty early, and I think a lot of times our students are somewhat surprised by that. So did you always go to bed early, or is this something that you had to build, a habit that you had to build?
You know what? When I was 18, or in university age, I probably didn't go to bed as early as I should have. Um, and it was something that I think that I developed over the years. Like I would say, I don't think it's hard. I get that everyone's a little bit different. Some people are early risers and some people aren't. But once you sort of build a routine around it and make it a habit, it does become your routine, and it's not that hard to get up early uh, in that case. So I don't think I was always that way. It's more of a product of what I do.
Hmm. Hmm.
But now it's just my life. Like even on a weekend where I don't have to wake up at a specific time, I just inevitably wake up at that time without an alarm. It's just the way it is now.
It's just the way it is. I'm right there with you.
Yeah.
Okay, so I would love to know a little more. So I understand the water, I've heard that before. People have recommended water right away. Why the electrolytes? I mean, I can understand what electrolytes do for us, but why do you specifically think it's necessary for people to have electrolytes in their water in the morning?
Yeah, essentially the electrolytes will just help you retain that water. So if you're drinking lots of water without electrolyte, or you can get electrolytes from food, and that's fine as well. But if you're not doing that, like it's harder for your body to hold on to that water and hydrate the cells within your body. It just creates this like I don't know if there's any science students in your program, but it creates that basically gradient, and it'll draw water into the cells and hold it in there.
Hmm.
And I think that's why it's important. And I'm not saying that water without electrolytes is bad because it's also good. The electrolytes just help you hold on to the water a little bit easier.
Very interesting. Okay, 500 mils. I mean, and is that like, do you just chug that? Do you
I,
just
I,
pound it?
yeah, sometimes I chug it, and sometimes I'll drink it on my drive, like to work. Um, but yeah, you can chug it. Yeah, no
Yeah.
problem.
And okay, super interesting. I mean, I think this is really helpful. These are reminders, that a lot of people probably just don't do. So it's helpful to hear about it again, even though they might have heard it before. And tell us a little bit about this no breakfast thing. Is that a personal preference? Do you do that because you believe that research shows that that's better? What's happening there?
Um, it's not better than anything else. There's so many different ways you can accomplish the same goals of whatever your goals are. I would never recommend this for athletes, by the way.
Mm.
I think they need to be fueling more frequently throughout the day. There is some evidence on time restricted feeding or intermittent fasting, if you've ever heard of this, from let's say a longevity standpoint in terms of how your body deals with uh, let's call them dead cells in your body, and it helps kind of metabolize those to a degree. So there's some evidence on it, but let's be real. It's if you're just eating a healthy diet and that which includes breakfast, whole foods, all that kind of stuff, that's also fine. I think the number one thing is, that you're eating whole healthy foods, and your calories and protein are in check. I like to do it because it makes it easier for me in the morning, particularly if I have to get up at 4:50. The last thing I want to do at that point is make breakfast. So I drink my water, maybe have a cup of coffee, go to work, and then at lunchtime I'll eat my
Oh, so
meals.
nothing until lunch in those cases.
Nothing until lunch usually. And then that being said too, I, make sure that the rest of my day I'm getting enough protein, enough calories, that I'm not losing too much weight or anything like that. So, it's more of a personal preference. Some people like it, some people don't. I'll actually even exercise fasted. I feel great when I do it.
Mm.
Some people don't. It's one of those things that you can adapt to, I think.
Mm.
And for me, yeah, it's preference. It's not to say that that way is better or than anything else, but
I have no training, really formally or informally, in biology, life sciences, and we didn't mention this at the top, but Ryan studied life sciences and he has a master's in exercise physiology. I have none of that. But I've always thought, based on all the information we see in social media and commonplace kind of theories around intermittent fasting or whatever the new trend might be, it's always made sense to me that people need to find out what works. Of course, if they're eating healthy, but they need to, I suspect that everybody's a bit different, right? Is that a fair assumption to make, that people shouldn't just assume that what one person said, the trend is going to work for them?
Yeah, everyone's different. It's not just nutrition, it's training. Everyone reacts differently to certain stimuli. And I used to I started intermittent fasting probably around 2007, and I would do one 24-hour fast a week. And that's how I started. And then I bumped it up to two 24-hour fasts a week, and that was not good for me. It didn't work with me. It didn't work with my body. And I think the main reason why I started doing it was not, at that time, it wasn't a health thing. It wasn't weight loss or anything like that. That's never been a concern for me. It was the mental challenge of that, where I felt like, I really didn't know what it was truly like to be hungry. We all you hear it all. "Oh, I'm starving. I'm starving." But you ate 2 hours ago. It takes your food 7 hours to digest completely. Very few people know what it's truly like to be hungry, and it gives you a different perspective on it. That's why I started doing it initially. And it had nothing to do with the health benefits, even though there are some health benefits for people. Um, and I guess my whole point is like I veered away from that 24-hour fast just because really didn't work for me. I didn't like it. I didn't like the way it felt kind of the rest of the week. And then I switched to intermittent fasting, and I feel great.
Hmm.
So, but I know some people that will do 24-hour fasts. Some people will do 72-hour fast, once a month kind of thing,
Yeah,
which I've done, and that's challenging. But
that's intense.
yeah,
I'm not sure I'm adding
yeah,
that into my routine anytime soon, but
you should
maybe
try it just once.
yeah,
Try it just once.
yeah, yeah, and I'll definitely be sure to have the electrolytes in my water on that day,
Yeah.
undoubtedly. Okay, so as we mentioned, Ryan is a sports person. So he's life sciences, exercise physiology. He does training, high performance training for athletes, a variety of ages. And we actually met in university where we played hockey together for 4 years at Queen's University, and then Ryan kind of developed his career from there. So he's been pretty much, I guess, maybe you could tell me, Ryan, but have you more or less been interested in the similar kind of career orientation from the time you were, 18, 20 years old?
Yeah, I think so. It evolved, definitely. Coming out of high school, I loved biology and I loved like human physiology and anatomy and all that kind of stuff. But coming out of high school, I, to be honest, I really didn't know my options and what they were. And so I was, essentially guided towards being a medical doctor. And I started in biology at Queen's. And then after my first year, I'm like, this isn't what I wanted to do. And transferred into life sciences, which was more human anatomy and physiology and stuff I was actually interested in. The reality is, I just didn't even know that program existed coming out of high school. And so I transferred into that. I realized like quite early on that I didn't want to be a doctor. And I was way more interested in sports performance side of things, but I didn't know that was a career, to be honest. So I did the kinesiology thing at Queen's after or concurrently with the life sciences. And I thought I was going to be a researcher in human performance. So I came out to Calgary, did a master's degree in exercise physiology, thinking I'm going to do a PhD and I'm going to do sports research. And, somewhere along the way, I was introduced to a couple people that kind of mentored me, Anthony Slater being one of them, who and realized that I could actually do this like as a job, as a coach kind of thing. And I really didn't know that existed. So I kind of like changed paths along the way. Like honestly, I was 27 years old doing an unpaid internship in Florida, trying to make ends meet and like wondering if I could actually make this into a career. And honestly, it was 3 or 4 years later, I was working in the NHL. And yeah, just kind of evolved that way. But I really didn't know I was going to do this until my mid 20s.
Yeah. That's great. That's helpful to hear the kind of more detailed description because one thing that we talk about a lot about in the program is today there seems to be this pressure that young people feel to know what they're going to be doing. And the truth is, as you described it, almost nobody, very few people will be doing what they
Eh,
expect.
And I don't even know what I'm going to be 45 this year, and I don't know what I'm going to be doing in 5 years from now.
Yeah.
Like you never know. So it's you never know.
One step at a time. Yeah, that's what we
Yeah.
talk about a lot. Okay, so maybe you could just tell us a little bit about because we've kind of dipped our toe in this idea of being in the NHL, working at the Olympics for the women's hockey team, and was it bobsled or luge?
Luge,
Luge.
luge.
So maybe tell us a little bit, if you have whether it's, a story or two about your time working with these professional and high level amateur athletes. Like, is there something that you would want to share with our students about what you learned in those experiences?
Yeah, and it honestly what translates through all the way through, like at any level, whether I'm working with 14-year-olds or professional or Olympic athletes. And when it comes to coaching, the biggest thing that I learned along the way is it's not about what you know. I mean, obviously that's important. And it's not about anything science related or anything. It's about the relationship that you build with the athlete.
Mm,
And I learned that really early on that if somehow developed a good relationship with my athletes, they performed way better in what I was asking them to do. So they didn't care, like they didn't care what I knew. They cared more that I cared about them and that they wanted, I wanted to help them get better. And that was the biggest thing. And I took that all the way through NHL level, same thing, right? Like when I got my first job in the NHL, I didn't want to go in there and, uh, what you were doing before is no good. I'm scrapping it all. I'm reinventing the wheel. This is what you're doing. No, my thing was I'm going to go in there, analyze the situation, see what they were doing, and learn about the players and the individuals, what each guy need. There's guys on that team that were older than me, had been in the NHL for 12 to 15 years at that point. I'm not gonna, who am I to come in and tell them what to do?
hmm
My goal is I'm going to come in and ask you, what do you need from me to help you get better? They know, right? Like
mm
that was the biggest thing along the way. And I think that's why I had a lot of success in the field. And it's not because of, oh, my science background or, you know, I was really good at demonstrating exercises or something like that, or my programming skills. It was the fact that the athletes trusted me and what I was doing because I developed these relationships with them on a personal level.
mm.
That was the biggest thing.
And how did you come to know or to understand that that was the most critical part of your job?
I didn't like set out to be that way. I think it's just the nature of who I am.
Mm,
Um, because I'm quite introverted, to be honest. Like I'm relatively quiet in a group situation. I don't really like speaking in front of crowds and things like that. Like those are things you have to do, and it's fine. It's not something I enjoy, but I do like talking to people on a one-on-one level, getting to know them on a deeper level. And I think just the nature of me being an introvert played into that to a degree. I'm not a rah-rah strength coach. I'm not in there yelling and screaming at athletes when they're doing things. My approach is to talk to the individual. If I see something that they're doing that I don't like or want them to change, I have a conversation with them one-on-one about it, or pull a small group aside and talk to them about it. And I think, I never went into it thinking, okay, this is the way I have to be. It's just the way I was.
And then you retrospectively came to understand that that was ultimately,
Exactly.
yeah.
Exactly. In hindsight, I'm like, oh, that's why I
hmm
was like that.
That's really interesting, and of course, as I'm sure is not surprising to you, that really blends well with our messaging and our goals in the program. We spend a lot of time with the students, helping them learn, interpersonal relationship skills and communication skills. And so I suspect that that relates to what you're doing. So it sounds like maybe you can fill in some blanks here, but it sounds like you would meet a team, the individual athletes, you would ask them questions, you would figure out perhaps what motivates them. Like, how did you specifically go about doing that?
Yeah, honestly, like the initial steps are even way more superficial. It's not about, oh, well, what can I do to help you? It's like, oh, ask them about their family and their, if they have kids, what their kids do, stuff like that. That's how you kind of build that connection with them, maybe joke around a little bit, things like that. And then you start to get deeper after that. Yeah.
Interesting that you use the word superficial, which I think is, if I understand correctly, what I imagine you mean is like, traditionally superficial or things that are kind of commonplace, but you would do it in a way that was meaningful.
Yeah, superficial might be the wrong thing. Superficial in terms of like sports performance per se.
Mm,
Yeah, I mean, like I think like it's a genuine question. I'm curious about the person, like it has to be genuine. If it's not genuine, they're gonna know and they're gonna see right through that, right?
yeah, 100%. Yeah, that's good. So this is, yeah, it's reinforcing to a lot of the messaging that we share. So thank you. I'd love to get to some of the kind of more, rapid fire questions in a moment, but for anyone who's listening, who's a hockey fan, you won two Stanley Cups with the Los Angeles Kings. What do you think, and now, especially a number of years removed from that, what do you think made those teams special? What enabled them to be the best?
Oh, that's easy. Like, okay, so I tell this story all the time with athletes that I have here is okay, we had a really good goalie and we had one of the best defensemen in the world and some really good players, but like our leading scorer was getting 70 to 75 points a season. The next leading scorer on the team was 50 something points. We didn't have a superstar. We weren't that type of team, but that's the key is that they were a team. And the leadership in that group was, I've never seen anything like it. Um, they probably had 7 to 8 guys on that team that didn't wear a letter on their jersey to say that they were a captain or anything like that, that would 100% be a captain on any other team in the league.
Mm,
And they played as a team. And I think that's the biggest thing. Like we didn't have any superstars or anything like that, but they played as a team. They cared about each other. They cared about the process. They cared about all that stuff. They weren't individual. No, our leading scorer at the time, Anze Kopitar, wasn't angry that he only had 70 points in a season. They were more concerned about winning as a team and what they did for each other. And that's the biggest reason why
mm,
they won without any, superstar athletes on the team.
yeah. And what did those 7 or 8 people do? Those guys who you said could have been a captain. Like, what was it about them? If you can describe a little bit more their characteristics, what did they do to demonstrate that they were great leaders?
Well, there's a lot of different things, and everyone was kind of different in how they express that leadership quality. But, um, some of the guys were vocal in the dressing room, supportive of their teammates. They all, like that whole team, just worked hard at everything, practice in the gym. It was just part of the culture of the team. Um, just how they carried themselves, what they did, how they supported everybody. It's hard to like everyone was slightly different in terms of their leadership skills and qualities, but it's hard to describe, to be honest. Like
Mm,
when I went from LA to Calgary, I was, you know, is significantly different at that point in time in Calgary. And that was something our goal was to build that type of team and leadership and all that stuff. They just didn't have it. They didn't have the personnel at the time. But
mm,
it's hard to pinpoint, to be honest. But sometimes it's vocal leadership. Sometimes it's, supporting your teammates, hard work, doing the right things. on and off the ice, all that kind of stuff.
We talk a lot in our program about the conditions that help build interpersonal trust, and this is something that I learned when I was doing a master's in counseling that I've brought with me everywhere. I think it's the most useful information I ever learned about. And one thing that find is often people have this perception of hockey players in particular and other, high-performing athletes that they are rough and rugged, and I hear you, saying support, supporting each other, supporting their teammates. And so, in the world of counseling, the way we offer support is, being empathetic, trying to understand who people are, what they're going through. Number two is unconditional positive regard. Showing people that you care about them no matter what. You might disagree with them or fight with them, but you care. And then the
Yeah.
third thing is known as congruence, which is integrity or authenticity. So people
Yeah.
know that they're getting the real you. So is that part of what you were seeing? And maybe tell us like how did that appear in the team?
Yeah, I mean, all three of those things for sure. I think that they were very authentic in how they communicated with each other. I don't think there was, yeah, like rough. I don't think there was any sugarcoating in that team of like, but they were empathetic to each other. Listen, they had a coach too that was extremely hard and challenging to play under, and they supported each other through that. And I think honestly, the second year we won in 2014 was almost in spite of the coach.
Mhm.
And maybe the coach did it on purpose. And knowing the coach, he probably did, um, to kind of get the guys to glue together. Like, he's the bad guy. Well, let's do this for each other and win for each other and support each other that way. So, um,
Mm.
yeah, I mean, yeah, I don't know what else to say.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting because it could just look different in different environments. How these three conditions show up just looks different, which I think is confusing. In my work, I found that's confusing to people that you might see, Sidney Crosby and Evgeny Malkin, fighting or even, yelling at each other on the
Yeah,
bench, but it's actually because they care about each
yeah. That's a normal part of the process, I think. Like, I'm not saying that, everything was sunshine and roses with the LA Kings when they were at the top of the league, but that's part of the process. And, there's disagreements, people disagree, but at the end of the day, you care about each other and you're all trying to achieve the same goal. So,
other. That's cool. Thank you. Um, Okay, I mean, I could ask questions about that for a long time because I think it's so fascinating. But I'd love to hear a little bit more, and I'm sure our students would like to hear a little bit more about you. So, you're an athlete. We played hockey together in university. You're someone who loves sports. What about your Is that your major pastime? With little kids, you probably are limited. But what do you do for fun?
yeah. So, my favorite thing to do in the winter is ski,
Hmm.
which I love to do. I like to play hockey and stuff still, but I like skiing a little bit more at this point. And my favorite thing to do, like in the spring, summer, fall, is fly fish.
Whoa, okay. Is that a
Yeah,
new endeavor, or has that always been there?
it's relatively new in the last couple of years, few years for fly fishing. I always, I've liked fishing for a long time. I grew up in Ontario and my parents had a cottage, so my brother and I would fish and all that kind of stuff. But fly fishing is relatively new. It's not a big thing in Ontario. It's really big out here. We actually in Calgary have one of the world's most famous fly fishing rivers that runs right through the city. So I can literally go from work, takes me 8 minutes to get to a spot and fish for an hour and come back to work, you know?
That's awesome. And are there
Yeah.
other
So,
people doing the same thing?
there's other people around, but you're pretty spaced out and it's not that bad. Yeah.
Okay. I lived in Calgary for a summer. I don't know that I ever saw that, but that's cool to know.
You kind of have to seek it out.
Yeah.
Those
Okay.
are, yeah, I would say those are my two favorite things. I play guitar, I do that kind of stuff, but those are my two favorite things to do.
Okay. Nice. Okay. How about we've talked about kind of relationships and what you think is important there. I'd love to hear if you have a story of personal failure. Like, what's a time in your life where you feel that you failed at something, but it was a useful lesson, and what did you learn?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the key is like, is there such thing as failure? I really don't. I really don't know. Like it's more of a learning experience for me. Is like it's never over. Um, Listen, my goal once I realized this is what I wanted to do for a living, my goal is to work in the NHL. And at that time, there was, 30 jobs in the world for that position. And I did two interviews with two different teams and didn't get the job twice. And like, how often do those jobs open up? I thought it was a failure. In 2009, I interviewed with the Kings and didn't get the job. 2010, I interviewed with the Montreal Canadiens and didn't get the job. But I didn't, like I obviously I was upset and I thought, okay, well, like, is this opportunity ever going to come again? But I kind of used it as a motivator. Like, why didn't I get the job? What do I need to do to get better? I also will use it was a great learning experience from an interview standpoint.
Mm.
Um, you know, two sets of interviews with two different teams, pretty extensive. It was really good. And I went back and I kind of evaluated what I needed to do in case that opportunity came up again. I think initially in 2009, the Kings liked me, but I felt like they felt like I didn't have enough experience. So 2 extra years. And then honestly, the guy they hired didn't work out for them. 2 years later, the job opened up again, and I ended up getting the job. And I think in hindsight, I'm glad I didn't get it the first time around because those 2 years really helped me, grow and learn and probably be better prepared in that situation. So I don't know if I would call that failure, but at the time it felt like it.
Yeah. No, that's great. That's great. It highlights, this decision that people have to, do they change course or do they learn from it, buckle down, or they, of course, you could still learn from it and change course.
Mhm.
Um, or do they proceed? And these are important questions, right? That we want to chat about with our students often. And kind of how do you decide? How do you? No one ever really knows for sure if this is a signal that you should change or if it's just a learning opportunity.
Yeah. In my case, it was a learning opportunity. I knew that's what I wanted to do. I didn't really feel like I was going to quit or change course.
Hmm.
So I just viewed it as a learning opportunity.
Hmm.
Once I got over the initial, whatever you want to call it, sadness of not getting the job, and it all worked out. So
And in that second opportunity, a couple years later, did they come to you or did you reapply? How did that work?
I reapplied. Um, it was kind of mutual. So I found out right away through some like connections that I've made. And I reapplied, but they also said we were going to reach out to you. So it's kind of mutual, but I went after it again.
Yeah. And you felt better prepared for the interview and you think it went much better, obviously.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
100%.
It's cool. That's great. I love these stories are really useful for our students to hear and to understand because the world often kind of, especially online, right, portrays this vision of, everyone's doing amazing. Only the rough people, the bad people are failing. But the truth, as we all know it, those of us that have been around a bit longer, is that we all have those failures. So thank you for that. Okay, we're coming to the end here, and I think a lot of what you touched on relates to some of the important themes. So the students, I'm sure, will have other interesting questions for you when you meet with them. But the question we always like to end with is, our students are 18, 20, maybe 21 years old, and sometimes the world seems to be a pretty scary place these days. So we strive to help our students build meaningful lives that are fulfilling and satisfying and diverse and full of learning opportunities and lifelong learning. So, what advice would you offer for an 18 or 20-year-old today to live a good life?
That honestly, like it's okay to be nervous and stressed out about things because your future's unknown and it will always be unknown. And I think that's fine and it's completely normal and no one will ever have it all figured out. The thing that I realized is that you just have to do the thing, whatever it is. You just have to start. Stop overthinking whatever it is and just start whatever you want to do. Just start. If you want to be a strength conditioning coach and you're nervous, you don't know much, well, how do you learn? You start training athletes or do personal training and you learn by doing. And that's the biggest thing is you have to do the thing that you want to do. Um,
Mm.
and in 10 years, you'll look back at your what you were doing 10 years previous. And I do the same thing now. When I was working in the NHL, I look back at some of the programs at the National Hockey League, and I'm like, I don't know, what was I thinking? Like, right? You learn by doing and just, yeah, just do.
Yeah, and don't wait to start doing until you figure it out. I think you hit on something that's really popular today. People feel like they need to have all the answers before they get
Yeah,
started.
just start. You're not going to have the answers ever figured out. It's a lifelong journey of learning. Like you're never going to know everything. Um, just start doing it.
Thank you. And I said this is the last question, but I love to tack one on if it's okay for you because so
Yep.
for Ryan for many years had a job. He had really cool jobs that were exciting and diverse and challenging, but now he's part owner of a company called Village Sports. And we were chatting before we started recording a little bit about, the pros and cons. So that's perhaps maybe a nice way to land here, Ryan, if you want to share with everybody a little bit about having transitioned from working with professional athletes for many years to now running a business, working with amateurs and some pro athletes. But the business part, tell us what the pros and cons. What do you like? What do you like less about having your own business?
Well, the reason I left the NHL was because of my family and my kids. And at that point, I loved the job. I loved almost everything about it, but I had to travel full time with the team and was not home very often. So even when the team would have a home game, I was not home that day, basically at the rink until midnight. Um, and then, my wife and I had kids, and I felt like that wasn't fair to them to not be home, and I wanted to be a good dad. So I made the transition into the private sector, um, which I enjoy. There's way more flexibility for me to be home every day at nighttime, weekends off, things like that. Those are the pros of this job. Much like the NHL, like there's a lot of things I love. The sports science aspect, the working with athletes, all that kind of stuff. The one thing I don't enjoy about this particular job is it is private. So in the NHL, you have 30 to 50 athletes that have to work with you. You don't have to sell, you don't have to, they have to work with you. Here, there's a sales and marketing component to it. And it's not really I don't get enjoyment out of doing that. I know it's part of the job and I need to get better at it. And it's just something I'm working on. But that's the one aspect that I don't love is the sales part of it. Put me in the gym all day long, writing programs, learning, all that kind of stuff. That's my bread and butter. The sales and the marketing aspect is partly a factor of the fact that I haven't never had to do it. It's challenging for me just because, I don't have the reps doing it, I think.
Mhm. Yeah, thanks. It's a conversation that we have a lot with students, and there's this idea perhaps that people think like, oh, do something you love, you'll never work a day in your life, and that, in some senses, is true, but in other senses, always going to be false. There's nobody that I've ever heard of that loves 100%
Right. Yeah,
of their job every day. So it's useful, I think, for our students to think about this opportunity. How do you balance the things that are really inviting and stimulating to you and important, and you include family in there versus the things that you're not as good at or don't enjoy. So it's important for people to know that that will always be.
absolutely.
Okay. Thanks very much, Ryan. It's been great, obviously, catching up with you. I think our students will have some interesting questions for you when they meet you.
Awesome. Well, thanks for having me. Can't wait.
Okay, thanks for listening, everybody. This has been another Good Life conversation. We hope to see you at the next one.